Welcome back for part two of our asynchronous course content on the opening and I do portions of a portion of the body of an explicit instruction lesson. So let's get ready to move on. So we have already talked about the attention getter. We've already talked about the review. And so the next thing you want to make sure you do is that you state the goal, the objective, or the learning target of the lesson. And this is important because obviously your students want to know what are they going to learn. So when we are writing those learning objectives, we want to make sure that we're using student-friendly language. So you have to think about your students, not only think about like, oh my goodness, my students are in second grade, and we'll see that in just a second, but you also have to think about where they are as far as their language goes. And we need to use language that they can comprehend, that they can understand, because the whole goal is for them to understand what they're going to be learning today. And so you're always going to make sure that you state the skill, the behavior, or the concept that you are teaching. And so let's look at an example. So I have seen someone who took the state standard and put that on the board as if that was the learning objective. And so I want you to think from the perspective of a second grader. I'm going to read this, and I want you to think from the perspective of a second grader and see if you understand what you will be learning today. Are you ready? Here we go. You will learn to write for a variety of tasks, purposes, and audiences using appropriate grammar and conventions, syntax, and style. You're going to be writing opinion pieces that introduce the topic, state the opinion, supply evidence and supports the opinion, and evidence that supports the opinion, using linking words to connect opinion and evidence, and provide concluding statement. I bet some of you are already lost, and we still have two more parts to go. And so if you share your state standard, imagine how your students are going to feel. They just heard wah, 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 and they have no idea. Maybe something like opinion stuck out. But if you are using language that they understand, then they have a clear idea of what they're going to be learning today, what they are expected to know at the end. So a more appropriate student-friendly objective might be, today you will learn how to write an opinion paragraph that tells what you think, gives reasons why you think it, and that ends with a conclusion. So they know they're going to write a paragraph. They know it's going to be about an opinion. It's going to talk about what they think. They're going to have to give reasons why they think there, and then they're going to have a conclusion at the end. And things like paragraph and opinion and reason and conclusion are vocabulary words that your students would have already mastered before you put those in that objective. All right, so we are not putting standards on the board. We are not sharing standards as our learning objective. We are using student-friendly language that we know our students can understand. All right, number 4. What kind of language should you use when stating your learning objective, and tell me why? And then when you're done, come on back and we'll continue with the opening of an explicit instruction lesson. All right. I look forward to seeing your answers. It's always a great way. I hope you can see the purpose in answering questions during the video now that you're understanding a little bit more about how learning occurs. And not only that, but when you're writing it in your own words, you are demonstrating that understanding because you're thinking through it. And so super good, super beneficial for supporting your own learning. All right. So when you are sharing that learning objective, what are your responsibilities? Well, you need to make sure that you state it clearly. You want to have your students repeat it or paraphrase it, which is why I'm having you write things in your own words. And then you want to make sure that learning objective connects to learning from prior lessons whenever possible, because you might be teaching something for the first time, although you can usually find connections with things like reading, writing, math, and communication. So let's take a look at stating the objective. So here is our objective for the portion that we are covering at the moment. Is that by the end of the class, you will be able to identify the components of an explicit instruction lesson opening. And so I'm sure because that is written in student-friendly language for you all that you know exactly what the expectation is by the end of the lesson. All right, then you're going to make sure you're talking about the relevance. We've already done the attention getter. We've already done the review. We just now did the objective so students know what they're learning. Now let's talk about why what they're learning is important. Not only do we want to talk about why it's important or have students share why it's important, but we want to talk about how can you use this in the future. It's not only important, but it's important because it is useful. And so what you're going to want to do is to make sure that you make those real world connections. This is important. This is useful in your real life or in the real world, in your future as an adult. Tomorrow, as a second grader, this is important to you for this reason because this is how you're going to be able to use this. You can connect it to academic purposes. For example, we need to learn, we're learning about opinions. Why is it important to learn about opinions? Because you are going to write an opinion paragraph about whether or not you think we should have ice cream every day in the cafeteria with lunch. Students would enjoy that one, right? So again, making those connections to their personal preferences. And then again, sharing those future connections. And so if I had a student in my class who loves skateboard. I don't know if they still do, but in my day, that would be called a skate rat. So skate rats were skateboarders who were all about some skateboarding and we were doing quadratic equations, I would make sure that I shared with that student, hey, Jamal, you know what? I heard you talking about building a half pipe in your backyard, that was something that you wanted to do. Well, I want to tell you, today we're learning about quadratic equations. Well, guess what? And I might even share this picture, is that when you build a half pipe, you have to use quadratic equations. So, man, what we're doing today in class is going to really help you when you're working on your own half pipe. And you can believe that student then is going to have buy-in. Noticing a star. Remember, I may not always say it, but make sure you see it, okay? All right, so what do you do when you're talking about the relevance or you are eliciting from your students what that importance may be? You want to briefly explain its usefulness, where this is not something we're going on for an hour. It is a part of our opening before we move into the bulk of our instruction. But you want to make sure that you connect it to things. You can always connect things to things like reading, writing, communication, daily life, and to me, the most powerful way you can share it's important if you can connect it to students' preferences or interests. All right, so today let's talk about the relevance of you learning about an explicit instruction lesson plan. Well, I know good and well that every one of you want to be really highly effective teachers because we know that is what's best for our students and for their current and future outcomes. And so there's a star. And it's a star because of this picture and the information it shares mostly in this picture is really important. I put this into AI again. I think these are some good uses of AI. Not to cheat, but to enhance. That's what I did is I put in and told it what I wanted it to say. So why is all of this explicit instruction opening important to you? Well, because in order for you to be that highly effective teacher, you need really strong openings because when you have a strong opening, it increases students' engagement and it increases their attention. Not only that, when you have a strong opening, students are more likely to learn when they know what to expect because they're prepared ahead of time before they go into it. They're not going into it cold. And they learn more, better, and acquire those skills better when they know what they're learning matters, why is it's important. And then when you have a really clear opening, it sets the tone. You are setting the tone for behavior, you are setting the tone for participation, and in the end, you are setting the tone for success. And as you probably guessed, number 5, in your own words, explain why relevance is important to students' learning. After you answer that, come on back and we will get ready to wrap up the opening of an explicit instruction lesson. All right, what is next? It is our preview. And what is the preview about? It is all about preparing students for learning, preparing them for what they're about to do and learn. So at this point, we've already stated the objective. They know what they're going to learn. They know why they're going to learn it. And now we're going to prepare them to participate. And so what it really does is that preview, it's I think of it as preparation, is it helps our students know what to expect and prepare to participate because we are going to share an overview. These are the steps we're going to go through in our lesson. This is how it's going to flow. First, we're going to do this. Next, we're going to do that. You share with students how they're going to respond or how they're going to participate. All right, when I ask this question or when we do this activity, I want you to give me a thumbs up if you agree, give me a thumbs down if you disagree. Or we are going to be participating in small groups, and when you're in your small group, you need to identify a recorder, blah, 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 someone who's going to share out, a reporter. Um, and you're going to set those expectations for engagement. We are going to set it. This is what it's going to look like. This is what I expect of you. Students do so much better when you do this ahead of time, when they can anticipate and they know what the expectations are. And then you want to make connections between the different parts of your lesson. So first, we're going to learn about opinions. And when after we learn about opinions, we're going to put that on our graphic organizer. Then once we talk about our opinions and we have stated our opinion on our graphic organizer, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the reasons why we have that opinion, why we believe we should have ice cream every day in the cafeteria for lunch. So making that connection between the parts of your lesson. So what do you do? What's your responsibility during that preview or that preparation time? Well, again, as I just said, you're going to outline what the flow, what the sequence of that lesson is going to be, and you're going to explain to students how they're going to respond and how they're going to participate. And so I might share with you something like, well, what are we going to be doing today? Well, first we're going to learn about the key parts of an explicit instruction opening. And after that, we're going to look at some examples of an explicit instruction opening. And I'm going to put you in pairs, and in your pairs, you're going to look at the lesson, you're going to read through the lesson, and you're going to identify the different parts of an explicit instruction opening. And so I want you to list those. I want you to read each one of those, discuss it, and then I'm going to have you share out one thing that you learned from reviewing the lesson plan. So right there, if I shared that, you would know exactly what we're going to do. Although I might go into a little bit detail. I'm doing that one quickly because we're in video. We will talk about that more in class. This format's a little bit off, but number 6 is in your own words. I want you to tell why is it important to prepare students for the lesson. All right, once you do that, come on back and we will wrap up the opening of an explicit instruction lesson. All right. So we have talked about the different components. Right now you have a full view of what an opening of an explicit instruction lesson should include, why those things are, what the purpose are, why they're important. And so what I want you to do is that when you're thinking about the opening, one of the reasons we want that to be like, boom, we're going to hit them hard. We're going to grab their attention. We're going to get them engaged. We're going to get that buyout is I want you to think about this. And I'm going to show you 2 videos and then I'll talk about it a little bit more. I don't know if you know about Sisyphus. So Sisyphus comes from Greek mythology. And Sisyphus was cursed, and when he was cursed, his punishment is that he was going to be pushing this big boulder up a hill for the rest of his life. And so let's look at what that was like for Sisyphus. And I want you to think about this as think about not having an opening and having an opening, and this being kind of an analogy for not having an opening. So for Sisyphus, remember, for all of eternity, this is what he's going to be doing. And look at the difficulty of it. And now look at him. So if we don't provide an opening, think about that. Think about that. That's what students are doing. They're starting off hard. They're starting off without having an idea of what they're doing or what's to come. And that can be equated to Sisyphus pushing that boulder, pushing that boulder, pushing that boulder up that hill. Now let's look at it and let's look at what the Indian Jones method might look like. And so, how do these equate to having an opening and not having an opening? Well, one of the things we want to think about is what's called behavior momentum. I'm not sure if you learned about this in your ABA course yet, but it's called behavior momentum. And what that is that when you get a behavior started, it's easier to get that behavior going. Just like it's easier for Indiana Jones. It is easier when we get that ball rolling for it to continue and even to pick up speed than it is for us to start from nothing. And so when you have an opening, not what you're doing, number one, is you're providing success right up front. We've already learned this. Now we're going to do a review and we are going to we are going to do a review and our students are going to be successful because this is stuff that they're already proficient at. And so once we get that success, once we've got that engagement, remember that's part of what that opening is. Once we've got that engagement, once we've got that participation, it is easier to keep that learning and that success going. Because what is the best predictor of future success? It is past success. Once we get that learning rolling, once we get that participation rolling, it is easier to keep it rolling, especially when we hit that new information that students have not, it's novel. They haven't had exposure to it before. So I want you to think, what kind of method are you going to use? You're going to use the Sisyphus method, or are you going to use the Indiana Jones method? Here we go. Objects in motions remain in motion, and an object at rest remains at rest unless acted on by an outside force. And you, in your opening, are that outside force. So when we use that Indiana Jones approach, once you get the boulder moving downhill, it's hard to get it to stop it. Once you get that learning going, hard to stop it. And so we want to use the Indiana Jones approach because when students are successful, it produces more success. And what's the best predictor of future success? Past success. All right. So, number 7, why is the opening of an explicit instruction lesson important and what purpose does it serve? So, go ahead, answer that, and we will wrap this up. All right. So, why is it important? It is important because it sets the tone. This will be a star. I don't know if it has a star, but this is a good one. It sets the tone of the lesson. It gets those students' attention, gets them focused and ready to learn. We're connecting whatever we're learning now, this new learning, to prior knowledge. We make sure that we're clearly stating what that learning target or that learning goal is. We get our students to start with success, and we know once we get that ball rolling, it's just going to keep on going. When we have a good opening, a strong opening, we have better student achievement and more positive student attitudes. Again, talked about that building instructional momentum, and we want to make sure that we have that momentum going before we hit that more difficult content. When students are already successful, that learning is already in motion, and it prepares students for what they're going to learn and shares with them why it's important. That's a really good screenshot right there. I think I'm going to skip that. Actually, let's not. Let's share this because this is a good one. All right. So, which do you want to wear today? This is a cartoon, and the student it's snowing outside, and it's time to go outside. And so the mom says, which do you want to wear today, April? The red one or the blue one? And she says, the blue one. And then the mom says, which hat? The one with the stars or the ones with the bunnies? And she says, the bunny hat. And then the mom says, what would you like to put on first, your boots or your raincoat? And she says, boots first. And then she puts on her coat and she realizes, oh my gosh, I've been had. The mom got that behavior momentum going. So why is this an example of behavior momentum? Share that. And that's what I want to think about. What would have happened if mom had said you can't go outside until you put on your winter gear or your rain gear? And do you think that the students that you're going to work with will be ready to just jump in and bite off a big old chunk of material? Do you think they're going to be ready for that? So again, why is this an example of that behavior momentum that I talked about? Stop and answer those other questions and then come back and we'll wrap up. All right, just to let you know, because you are going to be writing an explicit instruction opening, that I have a graphic here for you that would help support you in writing that. And it is a really good thing for you to review. It's got that star up there and to take a screenshot of for your future lesson plans and if you have to take the final. All right, let's do a quick check-in. How's everybody doing? Make sure that you add any questions to the end of your participation document, and I will see you in part 3 in just a minute.